Can 265 horsepower hauling just under 2 tons be as fun to drive as the marketing suggests? Hello and welcome back to the Volks Wizard channel. Now, we don't tend to cover many SUVs on the channel because they're usually slower, thirstier and more cumbersome than their hatchback or estate car equivalents, which are usually the more rational purchase. However, since its launch in 2014, the Porsche Macan has always been the exception to that rule, with chassis dynamics closer to those of a hot hatch. So when last year Porsche launched a new version of the Macan that was even more driver focused and, I quote, features an incredibly dynamic setup and a lightweight 2-litre turbo engine combined with an athletic design and a range of standard equipment that is ideal for a sporty driving style, well, that was it. I had to get it on the channel. So please say hello to the Porsche Macan T. So in today's video, we're going to see if it lives up to all that hype. But before we do that, let's get started by having a look at the Macan T's vital statistics. The Porsche Macan was launched in 2014 as a slightly smaller and more affordable alternative to the car many say saved Porsche from financial ruin, the Cayenne SUV. In late 2022, we got the Macan T, which is the car we have here. And this sits between the base model and the V6S model. It shares the base model's EA888 4-cylinder petrol turbo engine with 265 horsepower, and again is only available with 7-speed transmission and all-wheel drive. With launch control, the Macan T will get to 62 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds, which is really impressive because that's the same as a Mark 7.5 Golf GTI performance, but it doesn't tell the whole story because most of that time will come from the Macan's 4-wheel drive. If you want similar levels to the Golf GTI performance in normal driving conditions, i.e. in gear acceleration, then you'll really be wanting to buy the Macan S, which has got a twin-turbo V6 engine producing 380 horsepower and is only £1,400 more. We'll talk about that later for sure. Top speed of the Macan T is 144 miles an hour, which I'm sure is perfectly ample everywhere but in Germany. It'll do 28 miles per gallon on the combined cycle. Pricing: the base Macan T is £58,400, but this one's been bolstered with £15,000 of option, which we'll now cover in detail with an exterior and an interior tour. But before we do that, let me remind you guys how you can support the channel. The easiest way to do that is simply to subscribe. I'm sure you know how to do that by now, but the most important way is to give me the opportunity to buy your car. I'm still buying for a very reputable dealer, which means I can pay good money for good cars. We'll consider anything interesting, but we're particularly looking at the moment for Mark 7.5 Golf GTI, GTI Performance, TCR and Golf R. Cars must be average mileage or below, in really good condition. They must have a full service history, and unfortunately they cannot have the panoramic glass sunroof. I love that as an option, but the cracking problems means they can be a real headache to put right. So if you've got anything similar or anything interesting, then get in touch with me directly, Andrew at volkswizard.co.uk. Before we have a look at the factory options on this Macan, let's just have a quick look at the exterior, because not a lot has changed in the 9 years since it was launched, and it must have really blown people away back in 2014 because it still looks great today. Yes, we've got redesigned bumpers and wheels and lights, but the body in white I don't think has changed at all. It's not a small car, but as SUVs go, it's relatively compact. If you're moving up from a Golf, it will feel quite big, but at least on this car you've got the 3D camera to make parking a lot easier. I definitely recommend that. The best angle for me is the back, and that's partly because of these exhausts. So we've got 4 massive exhausts and they're all real. And it looks like a turbo used to. You'd think it would make a really good noise, and some modern Macans do, but unfortunately this one hasn't got the sports exhaust option, and as a result it's pretty silent, as I'll show you when we go for a drive. Right now, let's talk about the options. Okay, when it comes to options on this particular Macan, there is a lot to cover, so I'm working off bits of paper, so apologies for any rustling in the background. Firstly, let's talk about the colour. It's called Crayon. It's Porsche's take on Audi's Nardo Grey or Volkswagen's Pure Grey, and it's a £1,842 option because it's one of their special colours along with Carmine Red, which I think personally would look a lot better on this Macan. But as ever, colour is very subjective. For £473, we've got these side blades in carbon with a Macan T logo. Normally they would be agate grey, which is this colour, which is the Macan T trademark. It's on the bumper down there and on the tailgate spoiler as well. While we're here at the back, take in the tinted LED taillights, including a light strip. And these have got this really kind of interesting pattern they call diamar down there, I think. Yeah, they look really cool. They're £353, but I don't know, maybe it needs a bit of colour because it just looks a bit monochromatic. The only bit of colour is a reflector down there. At the front, we've got PDLS Plus headlights. These are £353. PDLS is standard and that gives you loads of cool features, but it doesn't give you automatic main beam, and once you've had that you won't want to be without it. So £353 for those seems like a bit of a bargain. Now you might just about be able to make out that the windscreen has got a subtle tint to it, and I'm pretty sure this means that we've got acoustically insulated laminated privacy glass, and this is thermally and noise insulated for increased comfort. And also you get privacy glass from the B pillar backwards. That's £1,152. It's good because it gives you extra UV protection. It's got solar reflection to prevent heat build-up, and it's laminated for extra security. Wheels, well, the Macan T gets its own 20-inch wheel style. These have been upgraded to the 911 turbo style, and these are £1,074 extra. So these are 21s, 911 turbo design wheels. They're front 9.5J times 21. It's with 265/40 R21 tyres, which are Pirelli P0s on this car. At the back, we've got still 21-inch, 10J wide, 295/35. Looks like black calipers are all you can get, and you can't spec any colours on this one. The S model comes with red ones, which look really cool. Brake discs are 350 up front, 330 at back, so not huge. Pretty similar to those on, say, a Golf R. Yeah, and it's quite a bit heavier, so I don't know how they'll hold up, but the caliper certainly looks pretty beefy, so yeah, there's more to it than just the size of the disc. Now this car has got an interesting option, which is adaptive air suspension with Porsche active suspension management, and it drops the ride by 10 mil. It's got three settings. It's got an off-road mode, which is high, a normal mode, and a low mode. I guess if you want the full Macan T sporty experience, you really probably won't want the adaptive air suspension, but from my driving it so far, it still feels like a pretty agile car to drive, as I'll demonstrate later. We have got also the panoramic glass sunroof. People love these in SUVs. So it's got a fixed rear panel, and the front panel goes up and over the back one, and it makes the cabin so much nicer. Okay, now let's have a look at the options inside this Macan T. Okay, first thing you notice inside are the illuminated sill protectors. They're in a black brushed aluminium with white Macan T logo. That's £324. You'll also probably notice the carbon inlays. That's £1,019 for door and dash, and that includes the back doors, which you kind of expect at that amount of money, but it doesn't get you carbon on the steering wheel. That's £482 extra. That gets you the GT sport steering wheel, and that's also heated with a little button down here you'll never operate by mistake. The standard Macan T 8-way adjustable seats are unique to the model. They've got like a pinstripe in the centre, which is a bit like Alcantara. These have been upgraded to the 18-way adjustables. They're £1,241, and you get the no-cost leather package with these seats, but you can spec different colour stitching and stuff. On the base seats, you do actually get contrast stitching, which I think looks really, really good. So it's kind of a shame to upgrade, and I'm sure the standard seats are really good, and they're more sort of in keeping with the Macan T sort of lightweight simplicity. But yeah, obviously, if you don't stay comfy in a car seat for very long, you might want to play with these buttons, though I always see 18-way adjustables as 17 ways of getting it wrong. Let's get in the hot seat and see what we've got. Now, it's probably worth mentioning, this is a very well-appointed cabin. Everything feels really solid and high quality. I'm sure it's closely related to some Volkswagen or Audi SUV, but you'd never tell. I mean, this steering wheel is pretty similar to what you get in like a Boxster GTS. Alloy pedals, cruise stock down here. The driving modes we'll talk about later. Now this is the main revision to the Macan area. This was all buttons before. It was like being on the space shuttle. This is a bit reminiscent of how it was. Imagine that, sort of 3 times as big. They've simplified things now by putting everything in this glass section, and it's haptic, which I haven't heard the press complain about too much, which I'm quite surprised about, but they only illuminate when you've turned the ignition on. They're a bit hit and miss, and in certain lights you can't actually see them. It's okay here, but when I picked the car up, this section with the climate control on was really hard to see. Thankfully, they haven't made this completely haptic, so we've still got traditional buttons for the climate control, and these are knurled, probably metal, I'm not sure, but actually Skoda Octavia's got these, so they're not that impressive anymore, but yeah, they feel nice. The shifter is a traditional shifter. It's not a shift by wire like on some later Porsches and Volkswagens. There's no option to shift the lever to the left or right for manual mode. We do have paddles, but they don't stay active for very long as manual. So the button here allows you to lock the transmission into a manual mode if you feel that way inclined. I'm sure most owners won't. It's also a multi-function steering wheel as well. And we've got Sport Chrono as standard. That gives us the launch control, which we'll try out later. We've got auto headlights with the traditional switch. Door cards are really lovely quality. Nothing flat. We don't have a upgraded sound system, so the door speakers are as plain as they can get. But yeah, rest assured, this is nice, old school Porsche feeling. We've got traditional analog dials and a digital section on the right there, just like a Boxster actually. So yeah, I'll just start the engine. Parking brake is down here. Okay, other options in here then, we've got automatic dipping mirrors, both rear view mirror and door mirrors. You can tell they're that type because they've got like this rim around them, which show they're self-dipping and very expensive to replace. So yeah, be very careful. We've got blind spot recognition as well with this light on the door mirror casing. It's not a new thing now, but it's kind of nice to have. And it does a self-test if you turn the ignition on and off. We've got reversing camera with surround view. So let's pop that into reverse, which is there. And there you go. So we've got normal camera, and then we've got a bird's eye view of the car just there. That is a £575 option. Probably money better spent than £453 on lane assist, but it's kind of cool the way it works. You have to spec it if you want it, and you pay extra for it. If you get it with a car and you don't want it, you can turn it off and it stays turned off, just like it did on the new RS6 last year. So that's pretty cool. Something I love the sound of, but haven't felt the benefits of yet, is an air ionizer. This is £222, and it improves the air quality in the vehicle. So before the air comes into the cabin, the climate control system air is passed through an ionizer, and this reduces the microbial and pollutant content of the air. And the bump says this has a noticeable positive impact on well-being. Well, why would you not want that? £222. We've also got adaptive radar cruise control, something that's been on Golf 7 as standard for like 10 years. Still an option on Porsches, and some people won't buy them without that. £666. I'm sure you know how that works. It works between 30 kilometres an hour and 210 kilometres an hour on these cars. And being on this stalk here, it's really simple and intuitive to use. I think better than the buttons on the steering wheel like we had on Golf. Standard spec is pretty good. There's no leather on this glove box lid, but it feels good quality. I'd say this isn't leather, but this is. And we've got the pan roof. So one of these buttons will open it. There we go. I think it's just over £1,000, as I said earlier, but it's money well spent with the colours. And the blind can go further back as well, so it does make this otherwise sombre cabin really lovely and airy, and there's a really big wind deflector there as well, so I imagine there wouldn't be an awful lot of turbulence. Now, unusually for any car, let alone a Porsche, there's nothing to upgrade when it comes to the infotainment system, apart from the sound system. If you want Bose or Burmeister, that the standard Sound Package Plus is pretty good, although I'm sure the upgrades will make the speakers look a little bit more interesting. So you get this 10.9-inch screen as standard. It's really high res, it's really fast, it's not laggy, it seems reliable. Wireless CarPlay is standard as well, really easy to set up, and again, that seems reliable in operation, not something you can take for granted. It does eat through your phone battery though, so we've got a wireless charging area there, but you can also plug it in there with 2 USB ports. There's a SIM card and an SD card slot in there as well. And not only do we have this really nice screen, which is touchscreen, of course, we've got knobs if you should want them. So if you used to say BMW's iDrive, you can just navigate like this if you wish.
Not active. Route card.
And there's a knob for the volume as well. So they have thought of everything, and yet it's still relatively minimalist in here. So I like that a lot. My favorite thing though is the built-in owner's manual. So yes, there is one in the glove box, but believe it or not, this says look at the digital one, because not everything's in there. So you can very quickly search for stuff, and there'll be a lot of stuff you might want to find out. Like I just wanted to check where the wireless charging port was, so I just searched in here. That should do it. There we go, mobile phone charging. All you need to know. Right, let's quickly have a look in the back. So the front seat is in my driving position, and I'm 6 foot tall. And in here, yeah, I've got knee space. So that's good. Just open the door, get a bit more light in. You can see the seats are actually contoured there for your knees, so that's quite clever. And there's a lot of headroom, maybe not as much as there could be because of the sunroof, but the sunroof does make it feel nice and airy in here. Down here we've got the third zone of the climate control system, so temperature up and down there. These vents look a bit cheap and feel a bit cheap, but they're okay. And down here we've got 2 more USB-C ports. Right, now let's have a look in the boot. Let's just quickly talk about the key. This looks, to all intents and purposes, like the key you've always had with Macans. Maybe these icons are slightly redesigned, but it's a durable key and it works really well, so I don't have a problem with that. This Macan's got the option of keyless entry, and unusually it also works on the back doors, which is pretty cool. It's not unusual these days, but we've got a power tailgate. What isn't always the case though is that we've got this extra button that allows you to lock the car when you close the tailgate. A lot of cars have only got this button. You have to lock the car separately, and you might even forget. The boot is much bigger than a hot hatch. So Golf is 380 litres, this is 488. With the seats down, this is just over 1500 litres, so just under 200 litres more than a Golf. So it is a big boot, and there's a lot more space down here as well. There is no spare wheel. We have got lashing eyes, we've got a 12-volt socket there, we've got an aluminium sill cover there, more storage here. But the real trick bit is, thanks to the air suspension, there's this button here which allows you to lower the rear of the car to make loading a lot easier. And because it lowers the car so much, even though it doesn't actually look it, they have to put a warning on the dashboard to remind you, so you don't drive off and damage the underside of the car. Okay, now let's have a look under the bonnet. Now, as a self-confessed nerd when it comes to the EA888 engine, which have been powering performance Golfs for nearly 15 years, I love seeing them installed in cars where you don't expect them, and that's definitely the case in the Macan T. Underneath this V6 looking engine cover is basically the same engine as the Mark 8 Golf R, and you'll be probably familiar with this sight because you won't have an engine cover on your car because of the fire risk. It doesn't seem to be a problem on this car because there's so much more room around it. The key difference though is that it's installed longitudinally, not transversely. So instead of the alternator being at the front over here, it's down here. Water pump, thermostat are all up there, and the exhaust switch on the Golf is at the back, is down the side here, and there's a turbo linkage right there. And you can just about make out the 7-speed PDK transmission, which is connected to the all-wheel drive system. But the big question for me, at least, is can 265 horsepower hauling just under 2 tons be as fun to drive as the marketing suggests? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's go and drive the Macan T on some wonderful British B roads. Let's start off then with the basics. The Macan T might be a sporty version of the Macan, but it's still an SUV and it still needs to be easy to live with on a daily basis. And I'm pleased to report there's nothing that would make it any less easy to live with than any other Macan. In fact, the fact it's better on fuel and cheaper to service than the V6 versions, you could say, would make it easier to live with. The seats are super comfy. I'm sure even the basic ones are, but with this 18-way adjustable, there's no excuse for not being super comfy. Driving position is perfect. You can get quite low if you're that way inclined, as I am, and that does feel more sporty now. In normal mode, the ride is perfectly comfortable. It's probably a little bit firmer than a normal Macan, being the T version, but it's not terrible by any means. As you can probably tell on this smooth serviced road, it's very well insulated in here. That's no doubt in part to do with the expensive glass we've got in this car, but yeah, it's so refined. We've got 7-speed PDK, which is the perfect Jekyll and Hyde gearbox. If you're just driving around town and you want a slush box, it will do that. If you want it to be super sharp when you're in the mood, it will do that as well. So yeah, no problems there. Yeah, it's just another SUV, but will it live up to the hype? Will it be good enough to excite the keen driver on a good road? Well, we are on a good road right now. To set the car up, I just need to fiddle with a few knobs. So firstly, we want to put it in a sportier mode. Normal's okay, but there's more potential. With air suspension, we've got the height we can alter as well, but we've also got the firmness of the dampers. So the best thing to do is really set this all up in individual mode. And with that, then we can have Sport Plus chassis and dynamics, and we can also have the lower setting for the chassis, which right down at the bottom there is low level. So that's it. Yeah, we've lowered our car with the clicking of a couple of buttons. So yeah, it does feel sharp. The finishing touch though is to select this M plus and minus button on the steering wheel. That gives us fully manual mode on the shifter. Will it change up at the rev limiter though? That will really help me decide if this car's fake or a real performance car. Yeah, that's a shame. Even in manual mode it changes up. That's a bit Volkswagen, not very Porsche, but I guess it is an SUV. Okay, so we've fully set up now then. As low as we can go, as hard as we can go in the dampers. Manual shift, let's hope we get a clear run on this road. So 265 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot. 400 newton meters of torque sounds okay. Nearly 2 tons, that does sound like a lot, but let's see what it can do. Actually, we're probably ready for a launch control now. All you have to do if you're in Sport Plus is stop, have the car warmed up, press your left foot on the brake and kick the throttle, and then we have launch control, so let's go. $60. So bearing in mind those numbers which don't tend to lend themselves to exciting acceleration, that was pretty good. So I think it's quick enough for most people. I maybe would want a bit more urgency, but the best roads are 60 miles an hour and we're doing that now. So the shifts are there when you want them. It's a very linear engine. It's not got a lot at the top, and that probably is something to do with the fact this engine actually replaced the diesel in the range, but it's much nicer than the diesel. And the brakes are lovely as well. I think those big monoblock calipers are the key to the feel of the brakes. It's not just about power with Porsche brakes. You want some feel as well, and you can actually just You can just kind of guess when the ABS will kick in, and it does, but you can get up to that point without triggering it, which is a bloody good feat for a car like this. Around those corners, it's just hot hatch, boys, watch out. Even this relatively lowly Macan will give you a good run for your money on this kind of road. That's partly because it's really four square on the road, it's wide, and there's not an awful lot of roll. I think you can get it to pitch a little bit, but it's not excessive at all. And the T version has got two things in its favour. It's got more drive to the rear, which is a surprise to me. That's really impressive. It's got less weight on the front axle than the V6 as well, 59 kilograms. That's a significant amount, and you know, it does feel agile. It's not a myth. It's not just marketing rubbish. It's true. It does feel like a lot of fun. It's not the most communicative of cars, but you look at the speeds we've been going through those corners, and they say everything you need to know about the Macan T. So it's good, but I can't get away from this one little issue. And that one little issue is the next model up in the Macan range, the S. For just £1,400 extra, you get 115 more horsepower, which is the equivalent of an up GTI under the bonnet, and that drops the 0 to 62 time from 6.2 seconds to a much more Porsche-like 4.8. It also reduces the 49 to 74 mile an hour in-gear acceleration time from 4.5 seconds to just 3.2. So yes, the Macan T does an amazing impression of a hot hatchback, but if you want your Macan to drive like a Porsche and sound like a Porsche, forget the Macan T's less is more philosophy. Pay the small amount extra for the S, because when it comes to Macans, more and more is the philosophy to stick to. As ever, guys, thanks for watching this Volks Wizard video. Keep subscribing, keep commenting, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.